Welcome to the 34th Annual Mandatory Education. We will start this mandatory education with driver safety. Many of our staff members and volunteers drive as part of their job duties, and safety is key. According to the Ohio Department of Public Safety, the statistics for Ohio in 2015 stated there was over 300,000 crashes, with 1,029 of those fatal. That comes out to 2.8 fatal crashes each day, which is about one person every 7.9 hours that is killed. And there are 297 persons injured every single day. Looking at more statistics, August, there are more fatalities than any other month, with Saturdays where most occur crashes. Majority of crashes are during daylight hours where it's clear, dry, sunny conditions, and Thanksgiving is the highest holiday for crashes. When we look at the type of distractions that are maybe causing these crashes, we see that phone use is at the top, followed by texting and even emailing, using laptops or iPads, and also playing with the radio, DVD player, and such. When we look at Indiana, we see that there's over 200,000 total traffic collisions. This is from the Indiana State Police in 2014. 702 of those were fatal, and 84 were related to speed. Over 24,000 of all collisions were speed related, and January had the highest frequency of collisions out of all the months. When you looked at seatbelt use, 53 of persons killed in a collision did not have their seatbelt on. Over 1,000 crashes are related to cell phone use. 6,000 crashes are related to aggressive driving, and over 9,000 were from distractions. Most crashes happen on a Friday afternoon from 3 to 6 p.m. And again, majority of crashes are during daylight, clear, dry, sunny days. And this is an economic cost of near $3.8 billion to the taxpayers of Indiana. So looking at driver safety, avoid using your cell phone or other distractions while driving. Make sure you have your seatbelt on. Slow down during inclement weather, and drive the posted speed limit. And drive defensively and be cautious. Hand washing, tuberculosis, and bloodborne pathogens. Hand washing is the #1 way to prevent the spread of infection. First, you want to wet your hands with warm soapy water. Second, apply the soap to produce lather. 3, make sure you rub all hand surfaces for 10 to 20 seconds to remove at least 80% of the germs. Rinse away germs, dry your hands with a paper towel, and then use that paper towel to turn off the water. And make sure you use hand sanitizer if soap and water is not available. Main symptoms of active tuberculosis. We do tend to see appetite loss, fatigue, chest pain, coughing up blood, productive cough, and night sweats. Let's learn more about tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis, also known as TB, is spread through the air from one person to another. When someone with pulmonary TB disease coughs, TB bacteria are expelled into the air in tiny water droplets. These droplets can remain floating in the air for several hours, making it possible for someone nearby to inhale them. Once a person has breathed in droplets that contain TB bacteria, they travel down the trachea and enter the lungs, where they collect in the alveolar sacs. Once in the alveolar sacs, the bacteria begin to multiply. The body's immune system starts working and macrophages begin to surround the bacteria. A granuloma is formed to keep the bacteria from spreading. The TB bacteria remain in the lungs, but the body is protected from disease by the granuloma. In 8 to 10 weeks, the person will most likely test positive for latent TB infection. The progression from latent TB infection to TB disease occurs when the granuloma break open and the TB bacteria multiply. Then the person becomes sick with TB disease and may be infectious. This progression can occur immediately after infection, many years later, or not at all. When the TB escapes from the granuloma and begins destroying a person's lungs, it's called pulmonary TB. TB bacteria can also enter the bloodstream and travel to other parts of the body, causing extrapulmonary TB.
And just remember, with the TB, that the person can have latent TB and they are not having any symptoms at all. It's only when those TB break free that it causes active TB with symptoms. Next, we'll look at personal protective equipment. To protect yourself, if you come in contact with any kind of contagious body fluids or contaminated skin or surfaces, PPE or personal protective equipment includes gloves, goggles, gown, and mask. And you would put your PPE in this order. You would put your gown on first, then your mask, then your goggles and gloves, and then you remove first your gloves, then your goggles, then your gown, and then your mask. Could you contact a disease at work? Certainly. If you administer any type of first aid and could come in contact with another person's blood or body fluids, if you clean restrooms where, again, a person's blood or body fluid, using any kind of equipment such as a glucometer or any other kind of tool that has dried blood, and certainly if you could be exposed to another person's blood or body fluid, you could contract any of the known bloodborne pathogens. And the bloodborne pathogens that we look at are HIV, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C. HIV, or the virus we know that leads to AIDS, it depletes a person's immune system, but it's not a hardy virus. It does not survive well outside the body, but it is found in any kind of body fluids that may contain blood. It is found very low quantities in saliva or tears and has really not been found in sweat of HIV-infected persons. Hepatitis B has symptoms that include jaundice or yellowish of skin or yellowish of eyes, fatigue, abdominal pain, loss of appetite, and possibly nausea and vomiting. It may lead to chronic liver disease, liver cancer, or possibly death. There is a vaccination available, and that is covered by hospice for any employee or volunteer that has patient contact. And again, hepatitis B cannot survive for more than a week, but it can be in dried blood. Hepatitis C is the most common chronic bloodborne infection in the United States. There is a vaccine for it now, but symptoms include jaundice, again, or yellowish of skin, fatigue, abdominal pain, loss of appetite, or nausea and vomiting, and again can lead to a chronic liver disease or death. Potentially infectious body fluids include blood, saliva, vomit, urine, any kind of secretions, again from the skin, the tissue, cells. Potential transmission could be contact with that person's blood or body fluid, mucous membranes that fluid gets into your eyes, nose, or mouth, or if you have skin that is cracked or open, or skin that is punctured with either a sharps, cut glass, or needles. So safe work practices that you would remove any kind of contaminated personal protective equipment or any clothing that may have been exposed, Clean and disinfect contaminated equipment with alcohol or a bleach solution. And again, thoroughly wash up immediately after any kind of exposure, and dispose of any kind of contaminated items in a biohazard bag, or if it's a sharp, make sure that you are using a sharps container. If you believe that blood or other potentially contaminated body fluids were splashed in your eyes, immediately go to an emergency eye wash or to a sink and flush your eyes out. And again, report that. Any potentially exposed employees should contact their supervisor. The hepatitis B vaccination, again, is to offer to all potentially exposed employees and volunteers at no cost. A specific incident of contact with potentially infectious body fluids is an exposure. If there are no penetration of mucous membranes or the skin was not open, then it's really not considered an exposure incident. But again, if you were stuck with a needle or you had a cut on your hand and body fluid got into that, any of those exposures, you would want to report to your supervisor, and a post-exposure medical evaluations are offered. Emergency preparedness, being safe, no matter what the emergency happens, and we want to make sure that our staff and volunteers are safe as well as others. So let's watch a short video on race.
Healthcare facilities have written fire procedures describing what needs to be done by the staff in every part of the facility. Understanding the plan for your facility and practicing evacuation procedures are essential steps to preventing loss of life during a fire. If a fire breaks out in a patient care area, there are specific steps to take.
Code red 843, code red 843.
Call out the facility's code word to alert other staff members. Activate the fire alarm. Evacuate anyone in immediate danger. Attempt to control or extinguish the fire if it can be done safely. Close doors to contain the smoke and fire. Once a fire has been contained to the room of origin behind a closed door, never reopen the door or attempt to re-enter the room to extinguish the fire. In general, evacuate patients who are closest to the fire first. Move them horizontally into another smoke compartment. Staff members in the adjacent smoke compartment should be ready to assist evacuated patients. Always use the fastest, most convenient means to evacuate the patient. Wheelchairs, gurneys, or stretchers are one alternative. But usually, there aren't enough of them to evacuate everyone, and it will take valuable time to get more. Often, the fastest and best method is to use carrying or dragging techniques. This takes teamwork and practice. The number of patients that have to be evacuated and the number of staff available at the time may influence whether one person or two move each patient. If only one staff member is available, place a sheet or blanket on the floor. Remove coverings and disconnect equipment. Slide the patient off the bed onto your legs and then gently to the floor. Then, drag the patient out of the room to a safe area.
So remember with fire safety, to remember the acronym RACE. R for rescue, rescuing any person from the fire or smoke. Alarm, calling 911 or calling attention to the fire and making sure others leave the building. C, contain, close all the doors to rooms or try to contain the fire in one room by closing all the doors surrounding that, and extinguish the fire if it's safe to do so. And let's watch a short video on how to use a fire extinguisher.
When using a portable fire extinguisher, just remember the acronym PASS. P, pull the pin. A, aim the nozzle at the base of the fire. S, squeeze the handles together, and then S, sweep back and forth until the fire's out. Okay? We're going to demonstrate this for you at this time. Start out about 10 feet away from the fire, and then you squeeze the handles together. And always make sure that you back out, watching where the fire was, so that way you don't have the possibility of a reflash.
So remember to use the word pass when you are using a fire extinguisher. Pull the pin, aim, squeeze, and sweep at the base of the fire. In case of a fire in any of the hospice buildings, you want to notify the staff that there is a fire, call 911, turn off any electrical equipment and exit the building and the nearest exit, and make sure that you go to your designated area. In Darke County, the designated area is our south parking lot, which is our biggest parking lot. Jay County is at the front of their parking lot, and Mercer, it is across the street by the subway. For a tornado, if weather reports or conditions are becoming more threatening, a secretary or a designee will turn on a radio to keep staff updated. If a tornado warning is announced or we hear the tornado sirens, then all staff will make their way to, in Jay County, we'll make our way to the bathrooms. In Darke County will be the bathrooms, and Mercer will be any interior offices or bathrooms. If you're driving and you see a tornado, you want to drive away and towards clear skies. Don't try to outrun a tornado. If flood has reached the building, no one should be going into our building without direction from our executive director. We want to relocate to a higher ground until the water has receded. And if you happen to be driving to the office or to other patients' home, do not attempt to drive through any type of high water areas. If there happens to be an earthquake, you want to get under a desk or a table if able. If you happen to be standing in the hallway, go to stand in a doorway. And then once the tremor is stopped, we want to evacuate the building and go to our designated parking lots. Unfortunately, if a bomb threat is ever made to any employee, that employee will immediately announce to the staff, and everyone is to evacuate the building. Staff will meet in their designated parking lots and wait for authorities to clear the building. If you come upon a hazardous material spill, employees are to follow any kind of procedures from the local authorities. If you are in a patient's home, then we should wait for any kind of instructions for the authorities. At the care center, any code black is a bomb threat. We want to make sure if we do get a bomb threat at the care center that we remain calm and keep the caller on the line as long as possible and alert other staff. Code brown is a missing adult. When an employee, volunteer, or family member is unable to locate an adult patient, the person will immediately notify the director of inpatient and palliative care and the hospital operator. Code gray, during severe weather, we want to advise patients and families of severe weather. We want to open doors to patient areas, close blinds, close windows, close any drawers, clear the hallways, locate any flashlights, and move equipment away from patient areas and remain in our designated area. If there is a tornado, patients and families will be moved into an inner windowless area of the unit. Patients who are able should stay on the floor back to the wall with a pillow and blanket. Patients who are unable to be moved will be covered with blankets. And the care center staff will stay with these patients, and the elevators should not be used. Code Orange is a hazardous materials spill. The care center doors will be closed, and employees, patients, visitors, and volunteers will remain in the care center until we get an all clear. A Code Red in the care center, we will follow race. We will rescue any persons that are in immediate danger. Alarm will be sounded. We will contain the fire by closing doors in the fire area and extinguish small fires by the following method of using pass. And if it is outside the care center, we will follow Wayne Hospital's exits, and we will make sure that we stay in the unit if it is safe to do so. Code Silver is an armed assailant or a hostage situation where Greenville Police Department is immediately called. When the police arrive, they will assume full responsibility of the situation. Anyone who enters a person displaying a weapon should seek protection and warn others. Stay alert, do not panic. Call the operator to report someone that is entered the building that they are armed. And care center employees will hide with patients in the patient's room, closing all patient doors and locking the exit door. Code Violet is a violent person, and if confronted with or if you witness a potential violent situation, the hospital operator will be notified, as well as the director of the care center. If the hospital operator announces a code violet for a location outside the inpatient unit, then we will shut the doors and we will not reopen. We'll keep those locked until we get an all clear. If at any time a staff feels that they are in danger, they are to call 911 and activate the code violet. At any time there's a combative patient, attempt to de-escalate the situation, but if they feel like they are in danger, then we can call 911 and activate code violet.
It may feel like just another day at the office, but occasionally, life feels more like an action movie than reality. The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces. But sometimes bad people do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the worst. If you were ever to find yourself in the middle of an active shooter event, your survival may depend on whether or not you have a plan. The plan doesn't have to be complicated. There are 3 things you could do that make a difference: run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision. Remember what's important: you, not your stuff. Leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your #1 priority. Once you are out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone, and call 911. If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide. Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can. Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. Silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm. As a last resort, if your life is at risk, whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm him. And commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly. The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooter. Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
Hopefully, we never have to do that, but just in case, remember that. Run, hide, or fight in an active shooter situation. Moving on, we're going to talk about HIPAA, Harassment, Elderly Justice Act, Abuse and Compliance. When we look at HIPAA, texting or emailing any patient information falls under the Electronic Protected Health Information as part of the HIPAA Act. Any patient-specific information must be protected at all times. Once you send a text, remember, there's 3 copies that exist. One on your device, one on the person's device that you sent it to, and of course, there's a copy on the network that it went through. Also, don't text any personal patient information. You can use the patient ID number, or you can use initials and possibly the location. For example, I can say patient number 5433 needs whatever they need. Or KL@BRC needs, and then you can simply put what they need, whoever you're texting. Remember, patient information at the offices or in your car or even at your home needs to be protected. So when you're at home or in a lobby, who's around you? Is your family hearing your patient conversations at home? Can they see your patient information laying out on the desk? and we want to make sure that it's protected. Again, we need to keep it in a secure file folder to make sure that those that do not need to see it do not see it. With HIPAA, we can have breaches, and a breach is an unauthorized acquisition. It's an access or use, or it's a disclosure of personal health information that's not permitted under the privacy rule. Unsecured personal health information is that it was not rendered unusable or unreadable, so it was not encrypted or it was not destroyed the correct way. Affected individuals is the person who was affected by the breach. In all incidents, a suspected or actual breach of personal health information is to be reported by our privacy officer as soon as this is found. An investigation is then conducted, and this may also be reportable to the Health and Human Services. With our compliance program, this is designed to identify and prevent any kind of areas that puts us as potential risk for non-compliance with federal or state or local rules or laws. And it also includes standards of conduct expected by employees. If there's any kind of concern or complaint, Joyce Steinke is our compliance officer, and you can reach her at extension 1216 or at 1-800-417-7535. Let's just watch a couple of short videos on risk areas.
Hello, my name is Katie Fink, and I am an attorney with the Office of the Inspector General. I'm here to introduce you to the False Claims Act. The False Claims Act, or the FCA, provides a way for the government to recover money when someone submits or causes to be submitted false or fraudulent claims for payment to the government, including the Medicare and Medicaid programs. Examples of healthcare claims that may be false include claims where the service is not actually rendered to the patient, is provided but is already provided under another claim, is upcoded, or is not supported by the patient's medical record. Claims also may be false if they result from referrals made in violation of the federal anti-kickback statute or the Stark Law. These laws are addressed in other OIG presentations. When the government pursues violations of the False Claims Act, it does not target innocent billing mistakes. False claims are claims that the provider knew or should have known were false or fraudulent. Should have known means deliberate ignorance or reckless disregard of the truth. This means providers cannot avoid liability by ignoring inaccuracies in their claims or hide their heads in the sand. Healthcare providers need to understand the program rules and take proactive measures, such as conducting internal audits within their organizations to ensure compliance. I should point out that even if a provider makes an innocent billing mistake, that provider still has a duty to repay the money to the government. The Affordable Care Act included a new requirement that providers must repay identified overpayments to Medicare and Medicaid within 60 days or be subject to penalties. What happens if a provider does not comply with the False Claims Act? For False Claims Act violations, a provider can be penalized up to 3 times the program's loss, plus an additional $11,000 per claim. And penalties can add up quickly because each claim for payment can be a separate ground for liability. In addition to serving as a powerful tool to recover money from fraudulent providers and suppliers, the False Claims Act also provides a strong financial incentive to whistleblowers to report fraud. Whistleblowers can receive up to 30% of a False Claims Act recovery, and that can be a lot of money. Who are the most common whistleblowers? Often, whistleblowers turn out to be ex-business partners, current or former employees, competitors, or even patients. FCA cases are in the news, and many involve large companies such as drug and device manufacturers or pharmaceutical companies. But there are also many cases involving smaller entities and individuals. For example, a recent FCA case involved a cardiologist who allegedly submitted claims to the federal healthcare programs for services that were not supported by patient medical records and did not meet the billing criteria. Additionally, the physician allegedly billed separately for services that the government had already paid for as part of a bundled payment for a group of services. To resolve these allegations, the doctor paid $435,000 and entered into a 5-year integrity agreement. Providers must ensure that the claims they submit to Medicare and Medicaid are true and accurate. One of the most important steps a provider can take is to have a robust internal audit program that monitors and reviews claims. If a provider identifies billing mistakes in the course of those audits, the provider must repay overpayments to Medicare and Medicaid within 60 days to avoid False Claims Act liability. Remember, it is a provider's responsibility to consistently submit accurate claims. It's the easiest way to comply with the law. For more information, review the False Claims Act or consult with your healthcare counsel.
Hello, I'm Julie Tatesman, Chief Medical Officer for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Inspector General. Why is proper documentation so important? What can you do to make sure your documentation practices are correct? Proper documentation, both in patients' medical records and in claims, is important for 3 main reasons: to protect the programs, to protect your patients, and to protect you, the provider. Good documentation is important to protect our programs. Accurate documentation ensures the federal healthcare programs pay the right amount, not too much and not too little, to the right people. Good documentation is important to protect your patients. Good documentation promotes patient safety and quality of care. Complete and accurate medical record keeping can help ensure that your patients get the right care at the right time. At the end of the day, that's what really matters. Good documentation is important to protect you, the provider. Good documentation can help you avoid liability and keep out of fraud and abuse trouble. If your records do not justify the items or services for which you billed, you may have to pay that money back. Let's look at 2 examples where medical record keeping was inadequate or inappropriate. The first example is a case of insufficient documentation. That is, billing when the medical record cannot back up the claim. Here, a hospital billed Medicare for several imaging services supposedly rendered to a Medicare beneficiary treated in the hospital's emergency room. When asked to justify the charges, the hospital produced this medical record. The medical record is for an ER visit. It shows a chief complaint and some vital signs. What's missing? There's nothing about the x-rays for which Medicare was billed. There should be a history and physical pointing to the need for the x-rays. There should be a physician's order for the x-rays. There should be an interpretation and result to show someone read the x-rays. And there should also be some indication that a physician treating the patient used those results when planning the patient's care. All of those factors are missing in this record. When OIG reviews a record like this, we have no way to know whether or not the beneficiary needed x-rays, whether or not the beneficiary actually got the x-rays, and if he did get the x-rays, whether or not anyone bothered to read the x-rays. In this example, the hospital billed for services, but the hospital cannot demonstrate that it deserves to keep that money. Better documentation practices could have prevented this problem. This second example also demonstrates poor documentation practices. We saw a claim where a provider billed Medicare as if the beneficiary had renal failure. We saw no evidence of that diagnosis, so we asked the provider to explain. The provider assured us that the beneficiary did in fact have renal failure and sent us this page from the medical record to prove it. The provider directed our attention to the highlighted letters to support the diagnosis of renal failure. Let's focus in on that section. It says chronic pain, pathology diagnosis, CRI, renal cell carcinoma, refer to oncology. CRI, an abbreviation for chronic renal insufficiency, is highlighted in yellow. I should note that the highlighting in the record was done by the provider, not by OIG. There is no notation to indicate that anything was added later. Now, this patient had a lengthy medical record, and our audit team had already obtained that page of the record. But in the earlier copy, it just says, chronic pain, pathology diagnosis, renal cell carcinoma, refer to oncology. So CRI was added to the patient's record long after the date on the progress note, after it had already been copied for the audit. If you discover you billed for chronic renal insufficiency, but the medical record does not indicate the patient ever carried that diagnosis, it may be tempting to simply add CRI to the record, but don't. the cover-up just makes it worse. The OIG website is a great resource for more information on how to avoid these problems and make sure this never happens to you.
Also with compliance, we look at state-of-the-art hospice employees will not provide or accept gifts or services or any other form of remuneration to or from potential patients or referral sources, and we do not participate in activities or business relationships that might pose a conflict of interest. The hospice program and criteria for admission are accurately described in all of our marketing materials, and claims for reimbursement are submitted by the agency are complete and accurate and reflect the services provided, the location of service, and the agency's hospice provider number. These keep us compliant with federal, state, and local rules. Resident rights. Reporting abuse, neglect, or misappropriation of property is a must. Any or all patient complaints of alleged or real violations of abuse, neglect, or missing property or injuries of unknown source must be reported immediately to the hospice administrator. This goes in with the Elder Justice Act from the Affordable Care Act in 2010. State-of-the-art employees and volunteers are required to report any reasonable suspicion. What is reasonable suspicion? Exists when there's a reasonable person under circumstances based on the specific facts suspects that a crime has been committed against an individual who is a resident of a long-term care facility. A crime could be verbal, physical abuse, neglect, theft, or fraud. Crimes involving serious bodily injury must be reported within 2 hours of the event, and all other crimes within 24 hours. As far as state-of-the-art employees and volunteers, they will report directly to the facility administrator and to the hospice administrator, who will coordinate timely reporting to the State Department of Health and any local law enforcement. Sexual abuse and harassment. It is the policy of state-of-the-art hospice that any and all employees, male or female, are assured a working environment free of any type of harassment. Harassment can be unwelcome behavior or a statement that creates an intimidating, hostile, or an offensive work environment. Sexual harassment includes unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, or other verbal, physical conduct of a sexual nature. When that submission to such conduct is made as the condition of that person's employment, or the submission to or rejection of that conduct is used as a base of an employment decision, or such conduct has an effect of unreasonably interfering with that individual's work performance, or it creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment. We have a zero tolerance for any sexual abuse committed by an employee, volunteer, board member, or any third party. Sexual abuse includes inappropriate sexual conduct, molestation, sexual assault, exploitation, or injury. Thank you very much for joining me for this 34th annual mandatory education. Please remember to complete your quiz and submit that with your name. Thank you.